Hey beauties, and welcome back to Aesthetic Chat with Kiki. I'm your host, Kiana Gamble. Update for you all, I am finished with my nurse practitioner program this year, 2025, in May. I'm so excited, but in the meantime, I thought it'd be really fun to bring on one of my good friends, Kyra Lindner. He's probably the one person that I am consistently talking to about all things aesthetics related, even not aesthetics related. I thought it'd be kind of fun to just let you guys listen in as we chat, hopefully to help those of you navigate a successful career in aesthetics. Episode 1 is just going to be you guys getting to know a little bit more about her story, and then we'll jump right into all the aesthetic fun.
How far back do you want me to go? Are we starting with childhood or postgraduate? We can do it real fast.
I think first tell everybody a little where you went to school, and then what got you into aesthetics.
Okay, I love it. So I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, right downtown next to Navy Pier, if anyone's ever been there. Love it. Beautiful city, phenomenal food, very cold in the winter. So I went to a French school there until about third or fourth grade. So I am bilingual, but ironically, my parents do not speak French. They just wanted me to speak a second language. Homework was very difficult because they could not help. But after that, I switched over to University of Chicago's little prep school. So they actually go kindergarten through university. And so I was there until I graduated from high school. So I was there third grade through high school. And my first foray into aesthetics, honestly, was I struggled with really terrible, very random, kind of confusing acne and rosacea during my teen years. And occasionally, face with rosacea for sure, but I'd actually get acne more on my chest, gross, but random. And it was super frustrating and nobody could figure it out. I went to multiple different dermatologists and finally I went to a dermatologist at Northwestern, and she was actually an aesthetic dermatologist. And so she did lasers and injectables and all of that fun stuff. And I had my first IPL. I saved up my babysitting money and had my first IPL at 17 and a half. I had to have, my mom sign off on it for me. And when I was there, I was reading all the pamphlets and, they had the Latisse boxes up and I was asking all the girls, oh my gosh, everyone in the office has such beautiful long lashes and amazing skin. I actually bought Obage's 10% liquid hydroquinone and used it with no instruction because they didn't provide any in the middle of summer.
Rogue. Oh gosh.
My skin loved it. And thank God, because it was one of those things I was how we used to just raw dog aesthetics back in the day is just so beyond me. That first IPL, I remember I had it done and my skin was thriving after that. And during that IPL session, Roberta Lucas was who that MD was at Northwestern. She actually figured out that the acne on my chest was not acne; it was actually a food allergy. And so at 17 years old, it turns out that I had celiac. I had learned more from that one appointment with that aesthetic dermatology provider than I had about medicine and my skin and all the things that I had been struggling with all of the different providers that I'd seen over my lifetime. And so I think that's honestly when I fell in love with aesthetics. And then when I went to college, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I loved psychology. So I went to CU Boulder. I was a psych soc major. And then when it came time to graduate, I went, oh no, I've made a terrible mistake. I don't want to go into this. I love people and I love talking to people and I love bonding with people. But, thinking about my life every day, because there aren't that many jobs for undergraduate degrees with psych soc, right? You can be a social worker or a consultant, possibly.
Maybe a therapist.
Therapist, great field to learn about. So I then went back and did an accelerated post back in pre-med at CU Boulder. And so when I was doing that, I was around all these people that were, gung-ho pre-med. They're like, no, I'm going to be a doctor. All they cared about was doctor, doctor, doctor. They really did not care that much about the patient. And so I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to be around, that mentality for the next year.
They wanted the prestige.
They wanted the prestige and the competition was wild. You know me, I'm inherently I'm competitive with myself. I just want to do the best that I possibly can. I want the 100% because I want the 100%. I don't care if everyone gets 100%. That's great. Then we all learned. I love that. But everyone was so weirdly competitive with a lot of different things. There was a lot of ill will with that group. And it was very interesting because I'm just listen, biology, we can all learn biology together. We can all be successful, right? Nope. Very, very strange mentality. So I was like, oh man, I don't know if I'm getting into the right field, right? So I ended up actually getting a job in healthcare security contracting because I was like, you know what, maybe I can be like hospital adjacent and still work with people in safety and, create good patient experiences and all of that. And I worked, and it was a good corporate job, like 9 to 5, reliable hours, like trajectory upward, all that fun stuff. So while I was working there, I was so random. I was in a car accident. And after that car accident, like, your life flashes before your eyes because I was T-boned at an intersection, really, really severe. I'm like, my shoulder was blown out. I'd have surgery, all these different things. And at that moment, I went, oh my God, if I died and that had been my whole life experience and that was my job, I would be so sad and miserable. And so
Oh
I
my god.
I know, isn't that dark? I reevaluated and I said, what do you want to do every day? Because it wasn't that, right? Like the guys that I worked with were great. They were all like ex-military and cop contractors and stuff like that. And they were actually just a really interesting bunch to be around because I was one of the only women in that field. And my boss knew when I came to them and I told him, he goes, I knew this wasn't your destiny. I was making like the Ebola protocols for them, during the outbreak. And I said, here are the safety and security measures that we should take. And I modeled them after who, right? It was just a presentation for the security staff. And he goes, he goes, I knew when we hired you, he goes, but that was the kicker. He goes, she's going to end up in real medicine. So I ended up leaving them. They were amazing, really sweet team, and becoming an MA. So I went to MA school, like one of those accelerated programs. So I became a medical assistant. And then during my like medical assistant rotations in school, I worked at Children's Hospital of Colorado. And as I was rotating through, orthopedics, they were like, oh my gosh, we love you. Like, do you want a job? And I was like, hey, sure, great hospital. Not necessarily what I wanted to do. Like, I always was really more interested in the sex and dermatology, but I really liked the ortho teams. And, there's not really much like derm in pediatrics, right?
Random rashes.
Yeah, yeah, all rashes. So I was like, not for me. And ortho was something I was like very straightforward, a lot of similar injuries. While I was a medical assistant there, I actually became an ortho tech. So kind of like my old job, a lot of the techs were ex-military. And so they worked at children's like post-military. And so they were amazing at casting and splinting and adjusting different types of fractures and things. And, with kids, like you're placating the kid, you're placating the parents, you're making sure everyone's comfortable, you're communicating with them to explain what's going on. There are a lot of different moving pieces. And so it was nice because you're really getting hands-on patient experience. You're able to produce like actual change. Like, you're literally adjusting, their bones. It's very fulfilling, but I still knew that, that wasn't like my forever passion. And so did my team. Like they knew that I was going to be there until I went to school. And it was really cute because they fought over if I should go to medical school or PA school. Because the PA obviously wanted me to go to PA school and the MD wanted me to go to med school. And I was like, listen, like I want to really go into aesthetics. And so it was like, for me, it doesn't make sense to spend all of the extra time in med school because it's not necessarily focusing on like that aspect of what I want to do. I was like, if I wanted to go into anesthesiology, 100%. So the PA was like, yeah, we won. I started applying to PA schools literally before I even had like the undergraduate requirements finished because I was obviously a psych-soc major and went back into that accelerated pre-med program. But like there were things that I was missing. I was missing microbiology and I was missing A&P. So I started taking those at community college while I was working at Children's. But every PA program has different requirements. So some of them are like, oh, and you need biochem and you need things. I was like, listen, I'm just going to go for numbers here and just started looking at programs across the country because I knew statistically you were more likely to get out on your second cycle than you were on your first. So even though I didn't have the requirements, I spent the money and I applied that year because I knew when I had everything done the next year, I would have a better chance of getting in. And actually, the second year I did narrow it down a little bit more because there were some programs that I applied to that during the application process, I was like, ooh, I'm not super vibing with some of the things that they're saying. And you don't know that until you like start going through some of the application process with them. So I'm actually really glad I did it that way because you get a little bit more exposure to the programs when you start going through the application process. So then the second year I actually only applied to like 3 or 4 schools. And everyone's like, you're insane. And I was like, no, like these are the schools I really want to go to. I'm not going to waste the time or money on other things. And I got into 2 of them. Thank goodness. And accepted the one that I really wanted to go to, which was MBK. I'm obsessed. Like the second I set foot on that campus, I was like, oh, like just the vibes, right? The vibes. And then I started meeting the teachers and I was like, this is it. This is the one. And I just like the way that their program is laid out. And that's something that if anyone is listening who like wants to go to PA school, the way that their program is laid out is so beyond helpful because they do everything by body system. And so where other programs will have, like semester or quarter-based things where they're like, oh, here's a semester of pharmacology. And then here's a semester, of anatomy. they did everything by body system. So like they would have a neurology, and you would do neurology for 4 to 6 weeks. And you're learning, the anatomy and physiology of like the neurological system. You're learning about like different drugs and different components that, are going to go into treating different like neurological conditions and disorders. You're going to go into like the most common diseases and injuries that you'll find in these body systems. I mean, it was so phenomenal because you can compartmentalize that information so much easier when you're learning it. And I really retained very, very well. Our teachers cared so much. And the way that the information was presented and the way that we were tested and the things that we did during school not only prepared you for the exam, but they really prepared you to be a provider. And especially going from MA where you're assisting everyone, it's a huge jump. I mean, OT, you have some autonomy, right? So like I was doing some things like autonomously like that, but you're still, the support for the team. So to be able to go and kind of switch roles like that and swap from that assistant role to the provider role, there's a little bit, of trepidation where it's like, oh, it's me. Like I'm the person who's in charge in that situation. Great. So then when we started clinicals, I mean, it was amazing. Like I got to rotate in so many different fields. I had a surgical rotation. I had a plastics rotation. I had an anesthesiology rotation. I had a dermatology rotation. I mean, I will say I got very spoiled by the school. I got every specialty that I really wanted to go into and some that I didn't even realize that I would love so much. Like a lot of programs, you're kind of stuck just doing family med rotations. I mean, we were emergency room. We were all these things. I was ICU. So, I mean, that was like a great almost 2 years of rotating alongside other residents and doing so many things and having a lot of, I mean, good and scary autonomy in some situations, right? Like day one of anesthesiology, like I saw, the first intubation and he looks at me and goes, okay, you're doing the next one. And I was like, ah. And no, he was dead serious. I was like, oh, okay. All right. We're doing it. That was really life changing because I mean, he was probably one of my favorite preceptors, truthfully, because I learned so much in anesthesiology. Learning that in a, safe setting like the OR, it's chill, you're listening to music, it's clean, it's safe. And then going into like ICU and other things after that, like I literally, like Calvin helped me save lives. Like when I was ICU, it was COVID. So we were intubating patients. We were doing a lot of different things. And I mean, we were so short staffed because there were just so many people, like it was an all hands on deck situation. And if he had not taught me, what I learned in anesthesiology then and how to intubate and, how to manage different code situations and things, I wouldn't have been as aptly prepared to deal with all of the chaos that is the ICU. So I knew that I wanted to go into aesthetics in every single rotation I did. I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it 110%. Maybe what if I want to like go into ICU or what if I want to go into anesthesiology or primary or OB-GYN or ortho or whatever else. And every situation I just wanted to do more aesthetics. And I was like, yeah, no, actually, like I love it, but from, like a medical standpoint, not like some people are salesy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that's not me. I'm like, nope, I'm a medical provider first. And just because it's about creating something that's aesthetically beautiful does not mean that it's not a medical practice. And I think that that's so important for people to understand. And so because I was solidifying that when I was in school, my free time was me flying out to take trainings with different providers across the country and learning hands-on things. And don't get me wrong, I learned some things in dermatology, like I did some Botox injections there, plastics, like, I mean, he did some filler and some different surgeries and different procedures, but it's really great to be able to see the anatomy under the skin in a live patient, where you're assisting in surgery and doing all of these other pieces. It's so important to understand all of that when you're going into what we do, because you can see, if you're going to place a product in certain planes, like what it looks like in the actual like living face. And that kind of changes, your perspective on being a provider and your perspective on, what products and what procedures you might want to take on and do, because you can see the effects inside the face. And you also find some things that you don't want to do, right? There are some other practices where you go, I don't know if we love that filler approach. Like you saw some providers who just take a full syringe and like just shove it into the bottom lip with one push. One push. That the one thing
A stylistic choice.
A stylistic choice. Like you're not even going to aspirate. Okay. So when I was in medical dermatology too, that was the other thing that showed me. I was like, oh, I originally set out thinking I'm going to, work in medical and aesthetic dermatology so I could be a more comprehensive provider. I realized I actually did not want to work in medical dermatology. I mean, you're freezing off molluscums, you're doing, excisions and biopsies and different things like that. And not that that's not, it's so important and so essential. And I make sure all of my aesthetic patients are seeing true dermatologists as well. And it was really great for me to be able to see like, oh, like that's a cherry angioma. Oh, like, solar lentigo, like versus like AKs and FKs and all the different things that you're evaluating between. And And anyone who wants to go into aesthetics as a PA, please get a dermatology rotation or two. It's so important to be able to, identify or be able to have that sixth sense of when things are slightly suspicious, especially when it comes to like lesions and lasers and all of that fun stuff. The more I solidified it, the more I'm like, nope, I'm going to just go into crippling debt and put all of these trainings on my credit card. I learned so much when I was in school because those free times when I went to those hands-on trainings, you're allowed to inject, you're allowed to learn. I worked with providers that literally I still use so many of their techniques to this day, even like half a decade later or more now. And that was absolutely invaluable. So that was super helpful. Graduated from PA school on a Saturday. Like we had our graduation ceremony on Saturday. We graduated on that Friday. Ceremony on Saturday. I took my exam on Wednesday.
The following Wednesday?
Yep, graduated on Saturday, took the exam on Wednesday. I was like, nope, I'm prepared. Like everything that I've been doing over the last like 3 years, I was like, no, I got this, crushed it. And better to do it now. Other people wait months and months to take it. Nope, take it right out of school. And I was at work that Monday.
Oh my gosh.
So there were not even a full 7 days in between me graduating because I had set everything up. And I'm not like always the most planned person with certain things. But like when I want something, I'm like, nope, 100%. I was interviewing for jobs and stuff while I was still in PA school. And so I ended up working for a large company called Ideal Image right after school because I was like, you know what? They're well known. They've got, the products that I need. Only downside was that we lived in Brea in California and Ideal Image that I worked at was in near Calbath, like Topanga Hills area.
So what's the drive time on that?
2 to 4 hours.
The sacrifice though that you made for somewhere to hire you, pretty brand spanking new, you put in some work.
Thrive. That's my dream. That's what I want to do. And you have to put in those sacrifices because when you are new in aesthetics, like you're a baby bird. Thank God I spent all of that time and money when I was in PA school, learning different things because when they have like a week in quotes, like a tool training program. Most of it is online and virtual. And like they have one day when you're like shadowing someone for Botox and one day when you're shadowing someone for filler. And I had not gone into, I literally went into $20,000 worth of debt. No joke. I think it might even be more, like 23, but around $20,000 worth of all the trainings that I did. And I did smaller trainings, like, so not the big box ones because they're so expensive and you get so little time and so little hands-on or no hands-on. Like, those trainings are like $5,000 to $7,000.
Yeah.
If I hadn't had that when I started there, I would have felt like a fish out of water because the day of Botox injection hands-on that you get, and like the week of videos, it's not enough to be confident as a provider. Now, can you, be safe after that? Sure. Their safety protocols were really great, so that was important. But you can't be, a great Botox injector with a weekend course, right? Like we know this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But there's, I'm sure, a handful of people that like just did the week, like the virtual and then the hands-on. And I think I would be terrified.
I would, and they were in their, like with respect to them, like what you're promised and what you're given in a lot of the big box places. They're like, oh my God, you get 2 weeks of full training. So I'm thinking, oh, full train, like 2 weeks of hands-on, right? Like you're going to be in there every day and you're going over, you're really learning everything. Well, no, you're covering 5 modalities in 2 weeks. And a lot of that being virtual, which the good thing is you can go back and refer to it. But I'm like, you're learning, like light-based devices, you're learning cool sculpting, you're learning, fillers, you're learning Botox. And I was like, how can you possibly even become familiar with all of those devices? Now, me, luckily, like I was already familiar with most of those devices. Like I understand the mechanism behind, cool sculpting. I understand the mechanism behind, like laser and light ideologies. We actually didn't have like their IPL/BBL when I started there, luckily, because that just would have been one more thing. We had ult therapy. So the ult therapy was the only one that I wasn't really familiar with just because of the mechanism, like the ultrasound based mechanism of that device is very different. But like cool sculpting and all of that, and just even the concept behind how it works, right? Because I'm like, if I'm going to explain something to my patients, I have to know it inside and out. I have to be able to explain, hey, the fat cells have, their organs actually on the outside, so they're actually really sensitive to hot and cold temperatures. And so that cold temperature, is enough to just cause that fat cell to die, but not cause, damage to cells surrounding it. To be able to explain what the device is doing to you so that you're confident not only like in me, but also the device mechanism, right? Because if somebody's like, yeah, we put it on you and it just melts your fat, and you're not going to feel super confident in that person. Well, how does it work? It just melts it. Like, you've got to know, like, hey, like this is the mechanism behind the device. You would hope, right? But that's just not that's not how it works there. And so luckily, I had done all those things. So I ended up just like becoming their like unofficial lead injector. And so I was spoiled in that sense because I got to do all of, the Botox and other things like that. And they were very, very on label in terms of Botox and fillers. So we didn't do a lot of like we couldn't do any lower face Botox. You couldn't do, a lot of different filler areas. Like everything was just on label. So like you could do cheeks and you could do lips.
Oh, well, like at that time too, like they didn't have a lot of indications.
No, that was like because that was like years ago, a lot of the indications didn't really exist and no cannula. Here's what's great about the big box stores, like you have everything that you need, right? Ironically, you can't treat every area that you need to, but you have everything that you need and like in a safe environment to take care of patients. And a lot of small places don't have that.
Right, you don't have the systems in place, like, working for a bigger company, it's like going to the hospital, you don't well, I didn't think about, like, having my contract looked over by attorneys or, like, my liability insurance or, like, those type of little things you were like, "Oh, I'm covered," because, like, they have an HR team, and they have systems, and they have people, and, like, people answer my questions, and you know what I mean? Like, they had a definitive chain of command.
Exactly. Your benefits are also laid out too. So you've got good insurance, stipends for different trainings and things that they might want you to go on. And like you said, like from a legal perspective, all of those things are covered. Those are all the benefits of like working for a big box company or a big hospital network. The hard thing is I think like there were a couple things that were a little bit misleading. Like they gave you like a stipend for training, but then they wouldn't approve the time off. Another kind of downfall where it's like you're going to do this way, this is our standard and you're not going to waver from it. So, like, even for lip injections, right? You couldn't backfill syringes. I had patients that were literally seeing me for their filler in the areas, and then I was telling them where else they needed filler, and they were going, like, I was sending them somewhere else to get it done there, and then come back to me for other things. And I'm like, the fact that that patients were so lovely and willing to do that was amazing, but, they were grateful for me being honest with them where I'm like, "Listen, like, I need a little chin," right? And, like, "I can't inject your chin, but, like, I can give you places that, I trust the people there to do it for you."
I think that's why they came back though. Like, because of your honesty. As a newer injector, I think people get into that kind of cycle of like, oh crap, like I'm not trained to do that yet. Like, do I tell them that they need this area? Are they going to go somewhere else? Like, do I tell them to go somewhere else? I think because people are afraid that they won't come back. You're honestly saying because you were honest and you were like, hey, go to this person, get this done, come back to me, I can do this. Like, I think they respected you more.
Oh, I think so, and I think that honestly, like, how many syringes can you get in your cheeks, right? This is what gets our industry into trouble because, like, on label is great. It's fine and dandy, and, I understand because they're a large company, they wanna make sure that they're, covered, like, legal liability-wise with some of that stuff, so that's where the on label comes from them. It's not, like, some demonic thing that they're doing. It's just like, "Hey, we're gonna just keep everybody safe, like, these are the types of injections that we do." But at some point too, like, the issue that they had also is that everything was pre-sold.
Oh.
I don't wanna put 4 syringes in your cheek, you know? Now everyone like, you have those patients where I'm like, "Oh, like, we could easily put, like, 4 syringes in there." It's like we're gonna build up, the structure in one way or, like, kind of mimic, bone for our first session, and I'll have you come back in 6 weeks, and then we're gonna mimic some of, like, the softer tissue on top, things like that. There are a lot of times where you can easily, use that amount of filler. It's not about that. It's just that they were coming under the assumption that they were gonna get 4 syringes in their cheeks that day. The other thing is too, sometimes they didn't need it in that area, right? Where it's like they wanted their marionettes and they want like that's what bothered them, but they really needed mid-face support globally. So those were things too that's difficult because you're kind of undoing that first consult while still trying to maintain a good relationship with the patient and make sure that they trust you and the organization that you're working with, right? Because it's like you don't want to totally be like, oh, well, that's nonsense. Like you don't need, marionette filler right now. Or maybe you need one syringe there, but we really need cheek support or piriform support or whatever else.
That's battling large expectations for a patient to walk in and say, "Oh, I've already paid for 4 syringes of cheek filler, and I'm here to get those 4 syringes of cheek filler." That's hard.
Very, very difficult, and I think that establishing trust after that is very difficult, but also, like, it's interesting to me, like, having people making like, doing those consultations with people who aren't medical providers, who aren't injectors, and I'm like, "But of course they wouldn't necessarily know," and a lot of them are really sweet and, can be very well trained and things like that, but it is difficult because you're making an assessment when you're not gonna be the injector, and even if it was myself and another injector, right? If another injector was making the assessment, I actually might have a different plan than that person.
Mhm.
No shade on, that role, and they were doing their job and they were really kind, that part of negotiating, patient relationships when you have so many, cooks in the kitchen with that kind of thing, that was definitely a struggle. I mean, and their long hours. I mean, they were 7 days a week, 8 to 8.
Oh, wow. But what a difficult role as someone that's, yeah, selling those packages and being in that consulting role too. I think even going back to the fact when you were saying, like, talking a little bit about, like, using the training credits and things, I think the people that did work in the hospital before, like, we've experienced something similar. I think when you said that, what came to mind is like you get PTO within a hospital, but in my own experience, like I never could get PTO like approved, like you throw in the request and it's like, we don't know based on coverage, like, yeah, or we'll approve like you put in 5 days and they gave you like 3 days, but like they weren't all in the same 3 days. It was like one at the beginning of your 5 days and then one in the middle and then one at the end. And so I think that people can easily relate to that of it being like, hey, like this is available to you, but in practice, it's not necessarily feasible or something that you can redeem.
100%. I mean, and that's where, like, the big organizations, they're like, that's where it can be a little bit more cold and callous, right? Because 'Cause they're like, "Oh, well, we don't really care if you have a funeral to attend or whatever else." I mean, our handbook at Children's literally had the number of days that you would get off for bereavement based on who died, and I was like, "Oh my god." Like, to see like, just harsh reality, like, printed on a page, can't imagine putting a number on
Yeah.
those things. Now, granted, I also worked with a couple people who had like 17 grandparents, right? Where I'm like, for the
Yeah.
sixth time this year that your grandmother died. But they're skirting the system, right? They're skirting a system that was set up to not really, be very heartfelt. So I understand people, but I can't do that. I'm just not one of those people. So you see it and you're just like, oh, you know what? Get your extra days. I don't care if your seventh grandmother. Like you go to that baseball opener.
Yeah, it's a give and take though, 100% of like working for like a large corporation versus working for a small business. There's pros and cons to both and like there's a give and take to both of those.
I think the other cons of like the larger organizations are, they have set appointment times, right? Like at one point we had 20-minute Botox appointments, and at one point they wanted to shorten them to 15 minutes. And actually everybody in the whole company kind of revolted back and pushed back on the 15-minute appointment times. Because again, these are patients that you've never met, that you've never consulted with, like most of the time. And you're having to do a full consult, full treatment, full everything in 15 minutes. It's not enough time. And that includes like, them filling out the paperwork and all those other things. So I'm like, that's a 3-minute appointment. And much like in regular medicine, that's just simply not enough time to do a good evaluation and good treatment. It's not in aesthetics either. And you want to have plenty of time to do everything that you need to do. And it's a huge investment, right? Like that's a huge investment financially for them, but also, trust and time and all those other things. There's no reason to rush through any of those appointments. Other places that I interviewed at and that I was offered jobs that had quotas where you had to sell X number of syringes in a week or a month or whatever it was. And I was like, no, absolutely not. Like I might have a month where every single person gets filler, but I might have 2 months where nobody gets filler. But that's just entirely dependent on what patients need. That's not dependent on your quotas. That's not dependent on your competitions. That's not dependent on anything that, is a marketing or sales ploy because we are providers first.
100%. Okay, so I'm going to stop you here. So we're going to cut episode 1. And those of you listening, we are going to come back with our second episode where we're going to continue this conversation and talk a little bit more about the details and why caring matters. So stay tuned.